What's going on, everyone? Zavich here, and that's right, you heard correctly, and you saw ArcheAge 2 is coming, and it's coming on Unreal Engine 5, which is really exciting news in itself, because it's the only MMO that's been announced for Unreal Engine 5, and part of that's because Unreal Engine 5 isn't even out yet. It's not even an officially released engine at this current state in time. So let's get into this article that we found regarding ArcheAge 2 in their interview with Jake Song, and we're also going to show you something pretty interesting about when this could be coming. If you hear some thunder, I live in Florida now, so there's a lot of storms here. Yay. Now, first thing to talk about is that for those who don't know, back in 2020, back at the start of 2020, Kakao actually bought out majority shares of XL Games. XL Games was actually really not in the best spot financially, and Kakao coming in and buying out majority shares and being this big financial investor for them now really helped this product become a reality. And so they're just going all in on it. They're like, hey, Unreal Engine 5, that's going to be the new engine. Let's do it. Let's try and make this something incredible that people haven't seen yet. And as of right now, it's currently going to be the only MMO that's going to be on Unreal Engine 5 at this time. Now, apparently the team that's currently developing it are already working on prototypes and discussing key features and testing basic gameplay. So that's really exciting to hear that they're already like working on some of these things for the game. They have a team of around 50 staff already working on it, and they're looking to increase that amount of staff for the development, and they're looking to actually push development really quickly. And this is actually one of the interesting things about Eastern MMOs, is that the Eastern development market is actually a lot faster than the Western development of MMOs. Eastern MMO companies tend to push content and games out a lot faster. Now, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, because that can sometimes mean that things are rushed or not finished or refined or should be the way that they're supposed to be. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, from what we've actually seen, they talk about pushing development, and this is kind of backed by one of Kakao's IP board timelines. And so for those of you who don't know, if you actually go to Elion, where it has Kakao's IPO, and it has their timeline for it, this was originally used for Elion specifically because people wanted to know about when Elion was coming, because Elion's this other big Korean MMO that's coming that's basically Terra's successor, and that's slated for the second half of 2020. So in the case of Elion, it's indicated as 2022H. So that means the second half of 2020. Now, if you go over here a little bit, right here, this is the ArcheAge logo, and that's slated for second half of 2022. That's only 2 years. That's not a long time. So I don't know if this is going to be looking at like a release product, or at least like something like an alpha or beta, or maybe just something along those lines. I'm not sure, but Elion is definitively launching this year in Korea. It is coming out. So you may see this game out, for all we know, in 2022 in Korea, with it closely following behind in North America and EU. That is one of the advantages of Kakao being part of this, is that Kakao does have a Western publishing branch for the Western market already. So I imagine that they would want to get this pushed out to their Western audiences as well relatively quickly. Similar with BDO, with what they've been doing, they've been really on top of that and getting content out for there with it, and making sure that, you know, you're not like super far behind KR. So, you know, if this released in the second half of 2022, NAEU could see it in the first half of 2023 for all we know. Now, obviously, that's still, you know, that's a few years away, but that's a lot sooner than what people would have expected. So definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of the game's development and how quickly they're doing it. Back to this, what to note would be that they are looking to have freedom be a continuing element in ArcheAge 2 from what ArcheAge originally was. ArcheAge was a game that allowed you to do a lot of different activities all over the world within the game, and that was one of its biggest selling points, was that kind of freedom that it provided. Jake admitted that in the development of ArcheAge that he was a little bit greedy and he wanted to have a game that was able to satisfy every type of gamer, and some of those systems as a result were not necessarily the most flushed out or well thought out or well developed, and that can probably be more aligned to what their like PvE content was. You know, their dungeons were not exactly the best portrayal of a dungeon, as many of the dungeons were very abusable with internal systems of a game. You know, you could completely bypass mechanics on a lot of fights. Even their 10-man raid was actually had fights that you could just one ability from one of the skill trees completely made the fight, you know, null and void. You literally just pop protective wings and people could just freely DPS and ignore any and every mechanic that the boss had. So I think a lot of their PvE content was not necessarily the most well thought out and developed and refined from its original development, and that was one of those things that they kind of put in to try and meet the needs of those that PvE audience. So it'll be interesting to see how they want to take that approach this time with ArcheAge 2. He talked about how having a countless and quantitative features is not necessarily what players want, but content to have a lot of density and completeness. So they're looking to have a core focus of the game and to improve on that and develop it more, instead of continuing to just keep adding new things instead that will replace them. Because he talked about that, even that a lot of the systems in the game, because of the lifespan of the game, you know, it's been 7 years now for ArcheAge in Korea, and a lot of the systems over time became irrelevant because of that time span, because they just kept adding a bunch of new stuff, and a lot of these older systems kind of just became, you know, an afterthought, as they no longer became important or valuable or were worth it just doing and spending time on it. So that is going to be something to see them address and change. Now, I think the one thing most people don't want to see is a labor system. I think people are kind of sick of the labor system, so hopefully they don't bring that back. If they keep the labor system out, that'll do a lot for the game, especially because the labor system is probably one of the biggest restrictions in terms of progression, and that is probably one of the biggest components in what compels people to you know, own multiple accounts in the game. So we'll see how they go about that. The desire is that they learn from the development of ArcheAge to make ArcheAge 2 something truly refined in the form of an MMO. And this is now something that they're really looking to be able to do financially, now that they have Kakao to invest and back them as well. They're looking to keep a lot of the original systems from ArcheAge, from their housing to the sea warfare to the cars and the ships and the gliders, all that stuff. Those are all things that made ArcheAge really unique, and made them stand out from other MMOs. And so that's really cool to see that they're planning to keep those kind of things. ArcheAge still to this day probably is the only MMO with the best functioning naval combat, ship navigation of an MMO, just like, you know, going around wherever you want on a boat, running into other boats, harpooning them, firing cannons on them, repairing them, raising the sails, putting them up, down, all that stuff. It's one of the only ones to do it really well, and the combat functions pretty decently in the water too. Now, there are obviously some parts of, you know, the water combat that could use some work, like certain abilities not working in the water, but that's just like, that's like the only drawback to it. Other than that, the combat still works really well in the game for their water combat. Now, it obviously stands to reason that they're going to want to bring it to NA and EU. One, because Kakao wants to have the products in multiple regions, especially as a publisher in a region that they're already publishing in for another game. So they know what the market's like here, and they know that there would be a market for the game here. And Jake Song himself is happy that a majority of their overseas sales outside of Korea were from North America and EU. So that stands to reason that we're going to be a priority for the game to get pushed out to, at least from a financial standpoint, now that they know what kind of market they have over here and that it would be a beneficial one for them. Now, one of the things that I am curious about is, will the Korean version of the game translate directly to the Western version of the game? So what I mean by that is that the Korean version of ArcheAge is different from the Western version of ArcheAge, the NAEU version. While the Korean marketplace tends to be a little more lucrative, their in-game features are also a lot more forgiving and welcoming and learning even. So for example, the farm cart quest gave you your Thunderstruck tree. The inventory expansion slots in Korea, you can unlock the first 50 additional inventory spaces with in-game currency, gold and silver, for your inventory and your bank. Whereas in North America, that farm cart quest, they don't give you your Thunderstruck tree for it. They give it for the farm wagon, but not the farm cart. And then in terms of the bag slots, you have to buy your bag space expansion right away. In the original game, you had to buy those additional bag slots with RMT'd items from the marketplace immediately. There was no, hey, you get the first additional 50 for in-game currency. If you need more after that, you can buy more. It wasn't like that for NA and EU. Tryon and Gamago were just like, boom, guess what? You got to buy it. Too bad. So, you know, having Kakao be a face with the product in both regions would be really big. And so that would be really interesting to see if they just do a direct one-to-one carryover for it, since they're going to be involved in both regions. So yeah, it's interesting. They'll have more details about ArcheAge 2 in the first half of 2021. So clearly they have more to talk about and share with us already, less than a year from now. And again, remember, Kakao has it on there for the second half of 2022. So who knows? So, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I don't want to say it's exciting because like it is exciting, but at the same time, it's like, but it's ArcheAge and we all know what's happened with ArcheAge historically. And so it's difficult. You don't want to be excited about something that you know could very well just be a really big letdown. But at the same time, you're like, dang, but remember these things that made ArcheAge so great? Imagine if they can replicate those, but for a different game and with a better engine. And so it's really like you're torn. You want to be excited, but you don't, because you know what kind of heartbreak comes with ArcheAge and the pain that it can bring you. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on over the next coming years. And you know, don't get, you know, too juiced about it just because we don't know anything about it yet. We don't know enough about it yet. So we'll see what they talk about in the first half of 2021, and we'll keep up to date on all of that. But guys, that's going to be it from us. Thank you all so much for hanging out and listening, and we are going to be looking to keep up to date on multiple MMOs going forward between ArcheAge 2, Lost Ark, Ashes of Creation, Elion, Crowfall, all of these games that are currently in development coming up. We're going to be working on putting out videos regarding all of them and some of our gameplay experiences with them as well. New World 2, can't forget about that one. But yeah, so thank you all so much for watching. You can find us live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Savage. So definitely hop on over there and drop us a follow. We're always talking about MMOs on there, and definitely hit that subscribe button on our channel so that you can get that notification whenever we put out a new video regarding MMOs or even ArcheAge. So have a good one. Take care and see you around.